there is a lot of take care of yourself and engage in self-care, but what does that mean? And how do I have time to do that when I feel like our entire family is in survival mode and we are in the trenches, and I cannot leave for an hour to go spend some time alone. I can barely use the bathroom on my own. Hey mama, are you feeling like you're walking on eggshells around your little one? Does every day feel like a battleground from breakfast to bedtime? You're not alone. If meltdowns, sensory sensitivities, and communication challenges are turning your days upside down, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Sensory Savvy Mama, the podcast for moms raising neurodivergent little ones. I'm your host, Victoria, and I get it. I've been there. The endless research, the frustrating appointments, the feeling like no one understands what you and your child are going through. Here, we ditch the cookie cutter advice and embrace the power of understanding your child's unique sensory needs within the context of your family. We'll dive into practical strategies, expert insights, and real-life stories to help you create a calmer, more connected family life. Because you deserve to feel empowered, not exhausted. Let's ditch the overwhelm and discover the joy of raising a sensory kid in a neurodiverse family. You ready? Let's go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sensory Savvy Mama. I'm your host, Victoria, and I'm so excited to be here. I have to let you know that last week was the first week since I started this podcast almost 6 months ago that I missed a week. And I have to tell you that I tried recording 4 different times, and every time something happened. Either one time I started talking and I started choking and I had to stop, and it took a while before I could compose myself and get back to it. 2 other times, total crazy tech issues that I've never ever had before. And then the fourth one, I don't even remember what it was, but just stuff kept happening. So it's okay. I'm going to take a hint that I'm not going to be able to put out the episode this week. I usually have stuff batch recorded and done ahead of time, but with the start of school and a lot of change in our schedule, I just had ran out of the ones that I had recorded and haven't had time to record some new ones with guests. And yeah, I was on the line, and before, I think the old me would have pushed through and pulled an all-nighter and tried to make it all come together. But I finally just said, this episode is not meant to be. And here we are. So in that note, I wanted to take today to address some of the questions that I most frequently get. Now, I know that I am not a traditional OT. I'm trained traditionally, but what that means to me is I tend to be a little bit more whole family view, lifestyle view. Let's use a very neuroaffirming lens for your child. And I personally use more of an attunement piece, both as a therapist and as a parent myself. And there are families that I work with that are not interested in that at all, and that's okay. So what that means, though, is I know that one of my most powerful tools as an OT, but also as a parent, is my own nervous system and how I help the children I'm working with or my own child to regulate. And it's difficult. There's a dynamic duo here because so often I see moms in total burnout and children in sensory burnout, and they get stuck in this spin cycle. And especially if there's more than one child in the house who is needing extra support, and you have a neurodiverse family with very dramatic differences. Now, every family has some diversity in their neuro profile, but when you have more extremes, then it becomes more difficult to balance and support those needs because they feel like they're in contradiction of each other or that you're competing for resources. And as a mom, that can be, one, incredibly difficult to figure out and manage, but 2, in our current culture and society, a lot of the demands and the kind of invisible mental load of managing all of the things and constantly being that nervous system support falls to the mom without much recognition of the toll that can take. if she is also not resourced and supported. I will never forget one of the first moms I worked with who came in completely burnout with a darling small child who had been kicked out of 3 preschools at this point. And when she was regulated and playing with you, it was hard to believe. But when she would have the sensory processing differences kicked in and she hit her point of overwhelm, went hard left into full dysregulation, and we're in a survival mode of that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, which usually we don't see the fawn early on. It's more of the fight, flight, or freeze. And she would go into fight mode, and you were looking at a totally different child, it seemed like. And it was baffling people how quickly that could shift and why the things that made it happen weren't very obvious. Now, how do we, as moms who are raising children with sensory processing differences, one of the biggest things that I can encourage you to do is learn about the sensory system, because in my experience, I love it. But in my experience, seeing families come in thinking there's a diagnosis, getting the diagnosis, getting services, getting support, understanding their sensory processing has the biggest impact on your day-to-day quality of life for your child and also for you. Because one of the things that I truly despised about outpatient, insurance-based occupational therapy, and why I created this new idea with the Edison Collective, was because I could have a great session with a child, but that was only 1 hour out of a week. And mom still had to go home and deal with all the things. And yes, what I did in the clinic did help, but it doesn't easily translate to what is happening in your home. And so the biggest agent of change is when a mom suddenly understands and is empowered with the knowledge of her child's sensory processing and what those differences are. What are the things that trigger them? What are the things that calm them down? What are the things that they are the happiest and most regulated doing? What does that look like when we start to create this map of what supports each child needs, and then looking at how we've structured our house and our time together as a family, and what does that need? Does that mean that in order to do a family dinner, we need background music on, or somebody needs ear defenders or headphones in? And when you know your child's sensory profile, when you have that clear understanding, we can go through, that becomes so easy. I don't even, as an OT working with families, when I'm coaching moms, a lot of times I don't even have to tell them what to do. Once we understand it, we connect those dots of this is why they're doing this behavior, and this is how that sensory system is affected, and why it's turning out this way. When we connect those dots, it becomes so clear of, oh my gosh, I know exactly what I can do to help them and support them. And so finding that out, I will put in the show notes the link for the free neurosignature, like discovering or uncovering or decoding, I can't remember the name of it, decoding your child's neurosignature. So your neurosignature is much like a signature. It's unique to you, but it's a reflection of your neurology. What is going on a neurological level? What is happening, that sensory processing piece, so we can start to put those things in place. Now, sometimes it's not so much how they're processing the incoming sensory information that's triggering them, but it's the output of that. And taking that information that's coming in and being able to organize and plan and move in response to that sensory information coming in. So that's what we call praxis. And that's that coordination. It's the motor output. It's how we respond, whether that's moving or saying something or doing nothing. That response is that praxis component, that output. And so sometimes kids can have, it doesn't seem like the sensory processing is dysfunctioning or that is the trigger, but it's that putting all that information together and being able to move through their environment in the way that they have in their head doesn't line up, and they aren't able to coordinate their body to do that, and they need more support. And that can also be really frustrating if you have a child who's not hitting motor milestones as quickly. Maybe they're afraid of the playground, or they just tend to be more sedentary and avoidant of things. Sometimes that's not so much being overwhelmed by sensory input as not knowing how to organize that sensory input to create and move and experience the world around them more actively. And those are some of the biggest questions and the biggest things that I chat with moms about is start going through. And the Clarity Lab is really great for this because it breaks down, it has that same video in it that you can get free in the Decode Your Child's Neurosignature, but it has that as that base foundation. And then it walks you through, like, how do we start to decode what's working and what's not working? And sometimes we have to rewind the day and look back at what was happening before. And sometimes it's not always obvious, right? It can be on that output piece as well, where it doesn't seem like there was any one thing happening, but maybe it's just on how they can't produce what they want the way that they want to, or they can't interact the way that they want to. And so when we start breaking that down, then it gets a lot easier for you to have some more tools in your toolbox to help you. Now, the other side of that is when you are in this spin cycle of burnout, when you are struggling as a parent and your child is also struggling, sometimes you're the average of both of your nervous systems. So if you are not taking time to take care of you, then that is going to lower the health and well-being of your nervous system and your ability to co-regulate. Now, co-regulate is when you are literally using your own regulation, your own nervous system to help your child regulate. Now, sometimes people get confused that we have to be like calm and regulated and very Zen-like all the time. That is absolutely ridiculous. We need a nervous system that is dynamic, that's able to respond. When your child runs out in front of a car, you need to be able to scream and to run out and to get their attention and get them back to safety. And being able to have the composure to respond quickly and not freeze up yourself in situations like that. It also means that when you are tired, saying that, hey, I'm really tired, I'm having more trouble doing this, and modeling for them as well. Nobody's going to have it together all the time. Now, when you have a child with sensory processing differences, and especially if you are figuring out that for yourself as well on this side of motherhood, it can be really hard to take that time for yourself. And that is not something that we are encouraged very much to do. There is a lot of take care of yourself and engage in self-care, but what does that mean? And how do I have time to do that when I feel like our entire family is in survival mode and we are in the trenches and I cannot leave for an hour to go spend some time alone. I can barely use the bathroom on my own. I feel like I have shadows glued to me all the time, and I am constantly using my own nervous system to regulate. And as soon as one child is okay, then the other child is freaking out, or they're both freaking out at the same time, but I can't deal with both of them at the same time because they're triggering each other. How do I do this? It's not easy. I wish it was. I wish there were more supports built in place. I wish that we had been conditioned to better take care of ourselves and know the things that we needed. When I was early on in motherhood, and if you've been on my email newsletter for a while, you've heard some of these stories. And if you're not on my email newsletter list, please join. I'd love to have you. I went through a period of burnout when my daughter was very young. My daughter was a very more high needs baby. And I don't say that, it's hard to say that out loud even now, but she would not fall asleep unless she was held. She wanted to be held all day long if ever she could, or be right there with her. She needed a lot of proprioceptive input. And as a baby, you can't go play and move your body and do heavy work, push-pull activities to help ground your system. Everything's more passive. And so you're needing to receive this input to regulate your own nervous system. And not that I'm expecting her to regulate her own nervous system. We don't have that expectation on babies. Not very many of them can self-soothe naturally from the get-go. And so I really struggled because sleep was so hard for us. And as an individual myself, I was getting so touched out holding her all the time. And I had 4 different baby sling / baby wearing items, and I literally rotated through those throughout the day. The only time that she was enjoying being down was in the stroller. She loved the bassinet, but then we needed to stay moving. And I got pretty tired pretty quickly, and I burnt out. And it was also during that time when I really started to see my own neurodivergence and my own sensory needs really come to the forefront in ways that I had no idea was there, because I hadn't been under this high level of demand before. I hadn't been able to do some of the things that I normally didn't think twice about doing, and having alone time and having quiet, and that starts to catch up with you. And the other thing that I learned was I could sit down and take some time to do like a spa-like afternoon or something when she was taking a nap when we got to that point. But that wasn't really as restorative as I thought. And so really finding out, just as you're finding out your child's sensory needs, you also need to be knowing, okay, what are the things that I really need? What really recharges me? Is that going out with friends and spending time? Is it an hour alone in almost a sensory deprivation tank or something like that? What is it that recharges your batteries? What is it that really helps you tap in to that inner knowing, that inner self? What do you need? And when I started doing that, that shifted the narrative. Even just sitting quiet for a minute and just putting my hand over my chest and saying, okay, this is really hard. What do you need right now in this moment? And being able to do that for myself, whether it was to wrap my arms around myself and give myself a hug, whether it was to let myself cry, whether it was to go move my body in a way that felt good. When I started tapping into that shifted things for me, and I was able to start recharging my batteries more. So that first part was figuring out my child's sensory needs, right? She had that need for that proprioceptive input, that need for that compression, that input through the muscles and the joints. So at an early age, because she's not moving on her own very well, it was baby massage and baby wearing and doing bath time where we're getting a lot of water sensory input in that way. Once I did that calmed her nervous system down a little bit more. Then I created more space to calm down my nervous system more, which then allowed more creativity and ways where and we both de-escalated in the same cyclical nature that we had escalated and spiraled into burnout. And it was such an eye-opening experience, because in the midst of burnout, when I was just crying my eyes out and so frustrated and feeling like I was failing completely as a mom, and it was something that I had looked forward to for so long and waited for, I felt like if I can just get her sleep, if I can just get her regulated. Meanwhile, I was barely holding on, and it took someone else looking into my life who loved me and didn't have judgment on how I was being as a mom, but could really say, hey, I'm out here looking in. Because when you're in the middle of it, it's very hard to see those patterns. I'll be honest, I did not know that it was a sensory thing initially with my own daughter. And here I am, like now somebody who's teaching this, and I had been in OT for multiple years at that point. I hadn't worked with babies, but I still felt like afterwards, it was such a light bulb moment for me of, that's what's going on. Okay, I know what I can do now. I know what I can do. And that in and of itself was such a relief. It was like the pressure valve, the steam had been released that was built up. And just knowing that made it so much easier than fighting this unknown of what is going on. And so I just, again, want to encourage you, figure out what is your child's sensory processing style. And you can do the Clarity Lab and you can start taking steps to figure it out on your own, or we can do the sensory blueprint together, which is a little bit more intimate, in depth, like 6 weeks, where we're going back and forth and we're literally almost like you would with an architect creating this blueprint where we're going back and forth of what do we need? This is how I want things to go. This is how I want things to be laid out. How do we structure life to support that? That's the sensory blueprint. And if you're on the newsletter, I have a really cool video that I'm going to send out this next week on a family that I did it with, and the mom shared kind of their stories and the revelations. And now this has been helpful for people who have known a diagnosis for many years and who have been receiving services and supports, but getting that clarity on that can make such a difference, because then the second part of this, and the part that these are really closely tied and intertwined together, is the you, taking care of you. And what does that look like for you to be supported and resourced? And knowing, like, I was living in a foreign country alone. My spouse at the time was not available to me at all and not really interested in helping out a whole lot, which is why I ended up going through a divorce as part of this. And I was unmasking and learning what I needed for support, and that was not something that they were wanting. And now I am not at all recommending divorce for anyone. That was the scariest and hardest and most courageous thing I have ever done. But I had to realize that I had been betraying myself and the things that I needed. And when I came to realize who I was and the things that I need, and that I'm worthy of asking for help, I'm worthy of being supported and resourced as a new mom. And when that was not something that was reciprocated by my partner, that was really clear. Like, I can't go back to doing things how we were. I cannot sacrifice what that means, how I show up as a mom from this space. And hopefully for you, it is not anything that drastic, but hopefully for you, it is something where you can have a conversation with the people who are invested in your family and around you, and look at ways to get a little bit more support. And even if that means that your child doesn't go well with other people, maybe you have a child who has more of a PDA profile and cannot stand to be apart from you, please look at other things outside of that you can delegate away and slowly start finding someone, bringing someone in that can be trustworthy and give you breaks. That is the long game. But you have to create a sense of safety for your nervous system and for your child's system. So figuring out that sensory processing piece of theirs, and then figuring out your own self-care piece, and not the commercialized, marketed self-care that we're talked about, but that deep inner knowing as the intuitive mom that you are, who wants so much more for her child and feels like you have to constantly fight to get anywhere. I just want to give you the biggest hug. And two, I want you to know that there's help if you need it. Whether you work with me or you work with somebody else, or you do it yourself and you figure it out, at the end of that neurosignature course is also a whole list of books and resources to continue to peruse and use at your own leisure. I have people all the time asking for different things, recommendations on different stuff, and those are included in there. But if there's something that's coming up, please let me know. But this is probably the number one question that I get as an OT in this space is, how do I support my child's sensory needs? And that starts with knowing what they are. Knowing the 8 different systems, knowing the 4 different neurotypes and how they present, knowing that your child's sensory system is more like a soundboard that you're mixing and adjusting constantly throughout a song, more than just they're a seeker, they're an avoider. When you start to understand and adopt that kind of perspective and looking at the sensory lens, it becomes so much easier to supporting your child. And again, creating those little bits of space, those little bits of buffer, the little bit of extra room for you to take care of yourself, regulate your nervous system, recharge your batteries, and being really honest with yourself of what that is. And that was another big part of that for me was, what do I really value? What really works for me? Like, I'm doing these things, but I don't feel better because of it. Or maybe I go out with friends, but the minute I come home, I'm right back in it. That's not really recharging your batteries. You need something that's going to downshift your nervous system for you, and it's going to last a little bit longer. And so figuring out what that actually is and finding ways for your child, what is that for them? What helps their system downgrade? And for a while, that might just be you. They need you. They need you to co-regulate with them because they don't have that skill. They don't have that capacity. They are stuck in survival mode all the time. And so really attuning to your nervous system, to their nervous system, and going back and forth between the two and figuring out, okay, how do we make this work? And when you come back to that values piece of what really matters for me, that changed everything because I realized there were some narratives that I had been handed that actually didn't help either of us, where I was performing and I was masking and doing something that I felt I should do, I should want to do, I should be good at doing, but actually really didn't help either of us. And when I could look at that clearly, then it became, oh, it actually doesn't. This can go. Let's get rid of this. Let's move this out. This is not something I need to spend my time or my energy on. And when I started making these little shifts and having this increased awareness, and it wasn't an epiphany. It wasn't like this huge change, a night and day shift, but it was slow little shifts. And to see where we are now, it's so good. It's so good. And I know it will get there for you too. I know it will. And if you, again, please let me know what resources I can and share with you. Please let me know if you want more one-on-one help. I'm also thinking about putting together a workshop where we go through this together because I think this is so important. Figuring out your child's sensory processing. How do we do that? So if you're listening to this and you are thinking, oh, I definitely want to do that, please send me an email and please join the newsletter because there's a lot of information that comes out in there that doesn't come on the podcast and vice versa. But I would love to hear from you. I think sometimes a lot of the stories and the things that I talk about on the podcast have come from real life experiences in the clinical setting, but my own personal life. And so I love answering questions, but this question has been one that has been coming up so much. How do we get out of sensory burnout as a family? And it really, you got to start at the beginning. And that is another really helpful thing is everything builds on the sensory system. So if you are looking at academic performance, or if you're looking at emotional regulation or even hand-eye coordination, right? Do they have a dominant right hand or left hand? When we follow that back all the way down, underneath all of it is the sensory system. And it just is so cool when we start with a bottom-up approach and start there. Already things start to move into alignment and shift to make it easier to function, to co-regulate, to regulate your own nervous system. And I want that for you. I want that. And I know that it is possible for you. Even if you say that your child is destroying your house and things are all over the place and you don't know what to do, and maybe you've even locked yourself in a room at some point to just breathe, or you have to remove one child because of their safety from another child, this is still possible for you. It is still possible to get to a place where there's more harmony and there is more peace and there is more regulation. And so if you are struggling with that, I would love one to just encourage you, but to hold that space that is possible for you and for your family. I know this was a totally different kind of podcast episode than we usually have, but I'm so glad to be back, that we only missed 1 week, and hopefully this one all turns out, and I can't wait to hear from you. That's it for this week's episode of the Sensory Savvy Mama. I hope you're walking away with some actionable tips and a renewed sense of hope for your journey. Remember, you are not alone in this journey. Your child is amazing, and you are the perfect mom for them. If you love this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other moms like you find our community and lets us know what you want to hear. If you want to connect further, you can find us on Instagram or subscribe to our newsletter for inspiration, exclusive sensory tips, behind-the-scenes glimpses, and so you don't miss out on any new episodes. We are all in this together, Mama. I love you, and I'm so proud of you. One last thing before we go. While I am an occupational therapist, I am not your child's occupational therapist. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. As the parent, you know your child best. So please use your best judgment and consult with your child's healthcare providers before exploring any of the strategies or ideas shared here. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out.